Everybody loves to be coddled by fine Corinthian leather, so let's talk about our top luxury vehicle picks for 2024. So Travis, let's talk about our top luxury vehicle picks and talk about Ricardo Montalban. Do you know the fine Corinthian leather of which I speak?
I do. But for
Oh,
some of these, I don't think we're going to have the fine Corinthian leather available. However, all of these
it's probably for the
interiors are going to
best.
be said. All of these are going to be pretty exquisite. Let's go through the list here. Our four finalists, in no particular order, are the BMW 7 and the i7. We'll cover that and the distinction and lack of distinction when we get there. We have the Acura MDX Type S. We have the Genesis GV70 Electrified or Electrified GV70. And then rounding it out, we have the Mercedes EQS SUV.
Yep, and none of them have pleated leather, by the way. So none of them have Corinthian pleated leather. Thank goodness. It's an era that is dead.
But they do have a lot to offer, and each of them in their own way.
Yes, and some very different options here, I would say. So let's start, in no particular, let's start with the Acura MDX Type S.
Okay. Yeah, so with the MDX Type S, it is going to be, I think our most interesting addition to this grouping starts out at 68,150, which is coming in as one of the more affordable options. But it is a unique package because while it is in the luxury segment, what it does is offer a lot without, which I think, a lot of extras.
That's true. And so this is kind of a tricky one because I know when we posted this on Facebook earlier, because we are announcing this on Facebook and on YouTube, slightly different timing wise, just because of our lack of organization internally. Sorry, everybody. There was some debate about MDX. Is it a luxury car? Is it not a luxury car? It is in the luxury segment, and it is the best selling three-row luxury SUV in America. But I suppose that is kind of a valid question. Is it a luxury car to you, Travis?
I think the this next step down is premium, and so we have. I think that MDX is somewhat on the line between luxury and premium. I would kind of accept it either way. No big dog in the fight. I think the other premium or premium-ish brands. I look at something, especially in the Japanese market, like Mazda, and I would say it's definitely a step above Mazda in a number of categories. So again, for our classification, it is different than the other finalists here, but I think we're okay calling it a luxury SUV.
For people that care about luxury content, I should mention MDX offers real wood, and you won't find any real tree in the new Lexus TX because Lexus has, for some reason, decided to abandon one of their core virtues there. But Type S is here because it's affordable. Affordable quote, I guess air quotes here, because if you're looking at a BMW X5 or you're looking at a Volvo XC90, you could certainly spend an awful lot more on those options. Should mention XC90 is actually the second bestseller in this segment, which is kind of a twist that I hadn't expected looking at the sales charts. But Type S is going to give you more content for your dollar, solid performance from that 355 horsepower, 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine, and the 10-speed automatic transmission is fantastic. We also get the torque vectoring all-wheel drive system. It's not going to drive like a GLE or an X5. It's not going to feel as opulent as some of those European luxury options can be, but it is going to be more reliable. And for a lot of folks, that is definitely a luxury feature.
Yeah, and I think when it comes down to it, when I think of luxury, opulent is one end of it, but then there's sort of the functional piece of luxury, which is there a need that is not met by this vehicle? And when I would look through a vehicle like the MDX Type S, it's got just enough of what I'll call the niceties that match what I'm interested in. That I say, yeah, this is more than I would probably look for, but not more than I would ever consider. And so I'm pretty happy sitting in there. I would probably rank it higher than some of the other vehicles on this list, just because of how it fits me. But again, I also understand the segment is pretty varied in that.
Yeah, and that's kind of luxury is such an interesting term because luxury means different things to different people. Some people mean or think of luxury as the most comfortable option. It's it coddles you nicely, it heats your butt, it cools your butt, it maintains your temperature, it does all those things, right? For other people, it is more of a brand focused thing, and Acura is not in the same brand category as Mercedes or BMW, and I didn't intend this list to be actually divided like top tier luxury, entry luxury, the way that it looks actually on the side of the screen there with Genesis and Acura at the bottom. But hey, that's kind of how it is, though. Mercedes and BMW are full line luxury companies. They make a sedan in every size category. They make an SUV in every size category. They have options that enter at $40,000 and options that go way, way, way into the six digits. And if that's not enough for you, BMW, of course, also owns Rolls-Royce, and they'll go into the 500,000 market if you want. Genesis and Acura are smaller companies. Genesis has a more European-like lineup with rear-wheel drive vehicles, etc. But they sell more cars in this segment than the competition does. So maybe we actually ought to talk about the Genesis next.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just going to say briefly, we don't have it on the list right now, but when you look at a company like Lexus, which very few people would argue is not a luxury brand, they sell anything from the LC 500 to the UX. And so it's quite
Yeah.
a range in this luxury brand. When we move on to Genesis, Genesis for this list has made the top four, and it's going to be with the Electrified GV70. I've mentioned it before, but I think electrification lends itself towards a luxury experience. And I think the GV70 is one of those vehicles that probably benefits from being electrified.
Yeah, it's something that I hadn't really considered for quite some time. But a number of years ago, I remember talking to someone that had come out of a BMW 7 Series, interestingly enough, and bought a Tesla Model S. This is actually quite some time ago. Um, and for them, they considered that a decent step down because it was missing a lot of the luxury features that you got in a full-sized luxury sedan. Obviously, it's smaller on the inside than a full-size luxury sedan too, because Model S is a mid-size. It's more BMW 5 Series sized, but it didn't have what they were after in a way, feature set wise. But for them, they realized that they just hated gas stations and they just did not like going there. They just did not like the time out of their day. They didn't want to hold the pump, whatever the reason for that was. They just decided that for them, the ultimate luxury was just never stopping. They go home, they go to the office, they go home, they go to the office, and that's all they wanted to do. They don't want to ever stop for something again. And I still don't quite understand it because for me, stopping at the gas station is not the world's biggest imposition. And I don't know, it just doesn't bother me that way. But I could see that people, are bothered by this. And that's part of why the GV70 is on the list. But I was also impressed by Genesis engineering on this model because it's kind of a wonky, nerdy thing, I guess, for why it's on the list in a way. But the GV70 was designed from the beginning to be a gasoline vehicle and an electric vehicle. And the way they did that was very expensive. They actually designed a completely different floor pan for the vehicle. It's one of the most expensive portions of the vehicle to design and engineer is that floor stamping. And they actually have two of them, one for the gas model, one for the electric model. So that way they can insert a flat battery there underneath the vehicle without really compromising the interior space. So on first glance, it looks exactly the same as a regular GV70 inside and outside. There actually is a slight interior structural change because of the battery, but they basically said, if you love a traditional car look inside, the way that a luxury car looks and feels inside, with the leather all over the dashboard, the fine stitching, etc., if that's for you and you want an electric one, then this is your electric one. But they didn't go the route where other car companies have gone, where they insert old generation electric bits, because they borrowed the 800-volt architecture from the new EGMP platform vehicles, and they sort of turduckened it, jammed it inside the GV70. So it's this interesting mishmash of things where it will actually, honest to goodness, charge in 18 minutes if you have the right charger. The range is not extraordinary, but the performance is very, very fast. It's definitely as fast as a Model Y performance. The range, I think, is actually still rational for most folks at around 230 miles of real world range, but it'll charge in 18 minutes from 10% to 80%. So road trips are actually not too much of a problem. In just a 10-minute stop, you can get a solid 150 miles of range extension in that GV70. So that's, for me at least, why it's on this list.
Well, and if you're going to be taking a road trip, the GV70 is going to be a much nicer place to be than a Tesla Model Y. and that's one of the reasons it falls squarely in the luxury category. Genesis has been on the rise for the last couple of years. They have made a strong statement. They have built upon that. We mentioned some of these other brands that have a sedan in every segment. Well, they don't, but they do have sedans still, and that's it's a strong move that is very luxury segment specific. We see sedans dying in a lot of other categories, and we even see an electrified version of their sedan. But specifically for that SUV, with thinking ahead, I think they've got they have a very attractive design. I like what they've done on the interior. Again, I've shared my personal preference for luxury, and I really like what they've done as far as aesthetics, integration of different materials, and staying fairly high tech with all of it. It's a good melding of old world and new world. I think it's a strong competitor, and I do think if you're looking for that luxury experience, hopping in and sitting in a completely silent vehicle that also has all the torque you need, at the drop of
Yeah.
a pin is really a great way to do it. So great to see it on here, and it is coming in as the cheapest vehicle on this list at $66,450.
Yeah, and I think it's also a better deal than the smaller GV70 or 60, which is weird and interesting. Even though this is the automotive turducken, where it's two platforms sort of jammed together, it ends up being actually slightly more efficient than the GV60 performance, for reasons that I do not completely understand, and also less expensive than that GV60 performance, while giving you a more comfortable ride, bigger, plushier seats, a bigger cargo area, that large prominent hood, which definitely is a style choice there, etc.
And a much more traditional look.
Yeah, definitely more traditional look, which I think is definitely good because the GV60 is interesting and spacey and futuristic, but it's not quite my cup of tea. For some reason, it looks a little bit frog-like to me. I don't know why.
Hmm.
But let's
Yeah.
talk about the Germans.
Yeah, and we got a couple on here. So I would say let's start transition from the electric SUV into the electric SUV. So that Mercedes EQS SUV starting at 104,400. So we are looking at not quite, but getting close to double what we just talked about with the electrified GV70.
Yep, and the EQS SUV is here because it is actually surprisingly efficient. We drove the long-range single-motor model not that long ago, and 300 miles of range, absolutely no problem in that vehicle. And the EQS is pretty big. You can get it as a 2-row, you can get it as a 3-row, you can get it as a $200,000 approximately Maybach if you want to. So this is that next tier of electric luxury. If you want 21st century Mercedes, you can get a Maybach. You can never visit a gas station if you don't want to. And talk about road tripping. A Maybach owner is just going to take the G7. Like you drive it to the airport, pilot takes you away, right? You have another Maybach waiting at the other end. So there's someone to charge it for you. You're not waiting to charge.
Yeah, you're not worried about that piece of it. But like I said, the the transition from a big engine luxury vehicle to a powerful electric drivetrain, just to me feels like the floating on a cloud. The
Yeah.
lack of NVH that's coming through just because there's a lot less NVH, and it's a small thing, right? But from your phone, you can schedule when your car turns on and starts to heat itself, and these are things you couldn't really do back in the
Yep.
world of internal combustion. And all of these interiors, especially in this EQS family, are really geared towards the futuristic luxury. At least one take on it, and I think they've done a fantastic job.
Yep. And so it's like you can remote start your gas car, but I can't think of one that lets you schedule that in that way. And you certainly should not remote start your car if you live in Chicago and your car's in a garage and it's 10 degrees outside. Don't do that. That's bad juju. But you could definitely warm up your EV. Yes, your range is going to drop down, but like I said, I'm for this customer that's spending over $100,000 solidly on this EV. They've probably got other things they can drive. What is luxury to you? Is luxury never visiting the gas station, having that instant power? Um, I kid you not. The last few times that we've visited some, driven some of these high end luxury vehicles at first drive events, when they're really digging into the demographic of these customers. So for viewers that aren't owning or interested in some of these vehicles, I'm really not kidding that they have other modes of transportation available. If you take a look at a lot of high-end luxury car manufacturers, this is not the only high-end luxury vehicle that they have. It's not just an EQS that's in the garage. They've got an EQS, maybe they've got a GL, maybe they've got a G wagon, maybe there's a whole selection of German luxury cars in the garage. So that sort of road tripping thing that honestly is a problem for someone that says, I want an EV and I want this to be my only car and I want to do all the things I want to do with it. Yes, that is a thing. In this segment, it's honestly a lot less of a thing.
It's an add to the garage, not trade in for something else in the
Right.
garage.
Yeah. And speaking of that sort of that decision-making process, let's move on to the option in this segment that has a wide variety of things going on.
Right. So, like I alluded to earlier, we have kind of a double header on this list. We're all keeping it in the same category. It's the BMW 7 Series as well as the i7. It's going to start on the ICE internal combustion end at 96,400, and the i7 is going to start at 105,700. So while we are seeing an increase, a smaller increase than we see, at least percentage wise, in some other ICE versus EV models, and both of them make a compelling argument for either one of these being the alternative to your EQS. If you want to do something a little bit different, you can hop in the BMW 7 Series.
Yeah, and if you want a plug-in hybrid, there's one of those too. So you don't have to, if you just want to split that fence right there. I will say that the look of the 7 Series has been controversial. Are you a fan or not? I don't mind the enormous grille, although I will admit it is big.
hmm I think the big grille looks better on the bigger car. I think that helps the situation because it becomes a little bit less dominant in as far as proportions.
Yeah.
It is very big.
It's less toothy than the iX,
Yeah, it's squared off. It's prominent. These are all descriptors that I would add to it. I'm not going to say it's my favorite, but by no means do I hate it. Um, it's the 7 Series in and of itself is an attractive sedan.
Yeah, and I always I haven't always liked the 7 Series, but the last two generations I would say I have really liked. And in a way it's because they're not quite un-BMW, but they're a different BMW than most people think of. The BMW 7 Series strikes me as sort of the new Mercedes because BMW's luxury vehicles on the luxury side of the equation, not the performance side, have definitely become more luxurious, a bit more softly sprung, more high tech, more comfortable. And honestly, I like the way the 7 Series performs and rides and feels more than the S Class. The S Class is nice. I think they did a good job with this latest generation. But if I were shopping for something in this particular segment, I would choose the 7 Series over the S Class or the A8. The Lexus LS and the Genesis G90 are kind of in a sub-segment below because Genesis does offer a full-size rear-wheel drive luxury sedan, but it is more of the value luxury entry. And I would argue that even though the Lexus does get up to about $100,000, it still comes in as more of that value oriented option. There's just not the range of bonkers luxury features, things like that. You can't get this absolutely enormous corner to corner LCD screen like you can in the back of the 7 Series. I mean, it's practically like having a 42-inch TV jammed inside a car.
Part of that is because the 7 Series doesn't come with a driver, but you might already have one picked out to
Yes,
take you
that's
around
true.
in it. Yeah.
The screen is almost so large it's ridiculous in the 7 Series, but that kind of is what this segment is about. It's about that opulence and that sort of ridiculousness, I guess, in a way, of the luxury feature set. And also, in a way, though, this is where we see features that are going to roll down into other less expensive models, not just from BMW, but from other car companies. This is the luxury segment. The luxury segment rather is where we see features debut, like collision notification and collision warning systems started in luxury cars first, and they made it all the way down to the least expensive Toyota that you can buy in North America. Night vision systems, pedestrian detection systems, adaptive suspension systems, road preview suspension systems that we now start seeing making their way into other vehicles. You can buy a 2024 Toyota Tacoma with an adaptive suspension system, and it would not exist if it wasn't for the cost profile, if you will, of luxury vehicles like the ones we're talking about here, and specifically, of course, the ones at the top of the luxury food chain.
Right. And when you look at the BMW 7 Series and what does it offer, again, besides a quiet, supple, speedy drive, you get a lot of customizability. You get a lot of screen real estate. You get a lot of lights and colors that you can play around with. And so it really is you get to create your own
Yeah.
ambiance. What are you feeling today? And here's the setting, and here's the scene change, and all those pieces coming together. One of the other reasons that I'm glad to see that this is in our top four is that when you look at the 7 Series and the i7, there is less separation in these models than you see in some other. Let's take the EQS SUV, for example. The
Yeah, it's a
equivalent
good point.
gas vehicle is an entirely different vehicle in the same category. The 7 Series and i7 and the plug-in, the 7 Series E, those have done a really good job of melding those things in a similar way to the GV70 and Electrified
Yes.
GV70. When you hop in, you could, if you had two of them in the garage and you said, this is my daily and this is my road trip car, you're going to get a very similar experience between them.
hmm And BMW definitely made a conscious decision to design the 7 Series around both drivetrains. So, like that Genesis, like you said, different floor pan, integration of their latest EV systems in that vehicle. The i7 is definitely very, very efficient. We have not driven the i7 yet, so that's why we're calling this 7 Series. Even though we're showing one with a little i7 there on the screen, hopefully we'll be driving one in early 2024. But BMW's electric drivetrains have some really novel features. If you want to nerd out on EV motor tech, definitely take a look at BMW's latest brushed motors that they're putting in EVs. It promises some efficiency scalabilities that we don't find in some of the competitive EVs out there. And it'll be interesting to see how that lasts in the future, how long those brushes actually last, and whether we really see some of those long-term efficiency gains. But without further ado, let us know what you think of these luxury car selections down there in the comments section below. And I will finalize this by saying that it was pretty difficult to not say, hey, let's just jam a Rolls Royce and a Bentley in there, because I did drive a Cullinan and a Bentayga in 2023. But those seemed, it seemed a stretch to put those on this list, because they're not luxury, they're ultra luxury. They're almost in a different planet than the ones that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about here. So let us know what your pick would be. Are we wrong? Are all four of these wrong? Should we have chosen something different? Let us know down there, and stay tuned for our finalist, our winner of this segment, that will be announced a little bit later. So see you everybody later.